Hello and welcome to Let's Pod This. We're so excited you're here. My name is Andy Moore. I am one of your hosts for this week as we discuss Oklahoma politics and government and things of that sort. Joining me today to discuss the topics du jour are my co-hosts, Scott Melson. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Welcome back. Welcome back. You were gone last week. Good to see you again.
Thanks, man. Glad to be back. I guess kind of. I'd rather still be on vacation, but if I'm not going to be on vacation, I'd rather be here.
Scott, listeners don't want to hear that. They want to know that you're excited to be here and thrilled to share some insights with them on this podcast program.
Things are pretty grim, man. Things are pretty grim.
All right, great. This week, Scott is podcasting from his porch, but we're all on the computer, in separate homes. And also, speaking of welcoming people back, Bailey Wright is now with us. Hello, Bailey.
Hello, I'm back.
I wasn't sure. You're changing your name? I assume because I was just on a meeting with you and it said BW for your name, so I assumed that there was a name.
Well, I'm going by Bailey Perkins Wright.
Bailey Perkins Wright. Mm-hmm. Oh, but Microsoft Teams only gives you 2 initials.
Right.
That's discriminatory.
They just won't let me be great.
That's nameism. So, all right. Well, Bailey Perkins Wright, welcome back. It's so excited to see you again.
Hi, listeners. I've missed you.
Oh, good. Isn't that nice? And full disclosure, listeners, the 3 of us have been chatting for about 30 minutes because we hadn't all been together, except for briefly at your wedding, which was lovely.
It was lovely.
It was a lovely evening. The weather was great. The bride was beautiful. The groom was happy. And can I just say, I don't guess we talked about it on the show, but when you walked out and you were singing the song, it was exciting for me to see your face and realize it. And I think because I'm taller, I saw it before a lot of folks around me. But then to see everyone else's faces be like, oh my God, that's Bailey. Oh my, Bailey's. Oh my. And everyone's trying to like be low key chill about it, but they were excited. And you did it. You made it all the way. That was phenomenal.
I have never seen anyone do that before, and it was so cool.
Well, thank you. So, big secret, it was the only 3 people who knew that I would be singing down the aisle were my wedding planner, my friend Jamie, who is an incredible, crazy good guitarist, who played the electric guitar as I was walking. Yeah. And then my dad, because I needed to make sure that he was queued up and ready to know what was going on and not surprised as he was walking me down the aisle. And so that moment was very special to surprise everybody, including my now husband. And so, yeah.
That was great. Very exciting.
That was a particularly beautiful moment in a night that was filled with beautiful moments.
Well, my favorite thing was my neighbor was helping with setup and things like that for the wedding. And I've known her pretty much my whole life. I grew up in Lawton with her kids. And then coincidentally, when we moved to the duplex that we're in, she moved right next door to us. So it was awesome. We love having her as a neighbor. But she recorded it from up top. And she didn't realize that like I was about to sing. And so you hear her commentary in the video with her and her daughter, like, is that Bailey? Is she singing? She was like, maybe that might be her. I don't know. And so she's like, shh, be quiet. I think that might be Bailey. And then all of a sudden they're like, that is Bailey. So it was funny, like hearing their like in real time reaction to that big surprise. So
funny. It was, yeah, it was, as Scott said, it was a lovely evening. So, well, let's talk about something less lovely, perhaps, and that's Oklahoma politics. It's been a few weeks since we've done one. Last week I did a solo episode. Before that we did just Scott and I, and so we've got I think a decent amount to catch up on. Part of that is that today Sean Ashley reported that Oklahoma Tax Commission Chairman Clark Jolly, who has submitted his resignation effective November 1st, I can't help but wonder if this is convenient timing, given the fact that the legislature will be convening 2 weeks after that for special session, presumably passing maps and adjusting the timeline for filing for office. Clark Jolly, a former state lawmaker, do you think that we will see his name come up on a ballot next year for some other position?
I wouldn't be surprised. Now, the question would be, what would he run for? Because we are seeing different candidates pop up, like Nathan Dom running for U.S. Senate now. So, who knows what position he would run for in this election cycle?
Well, he's termed out of the ledge, right? Like
Mhm.
he do his full 12 years in the legislature,
It
so
would
he
be
can't
some
run.
statewide position for
Yeah, he
sure.
can't run for House or Senate. Statewide, there's no residency requirement, right? Like you can live anywhere and run for statewide office. There's a lot of speculation that our current Secretary of Education is gonna be running for state superintendent because Superintendent Hoffmeister will be termed out.
Well,
So
he announced too,
oh, he
didn't he?
did announce.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I can't keep it all. Yeah. So he's running. He's running. I don't know what would Clark Jolly be interested in, do you think?
I haven't had a chance. I mean, I just saw this. The news came out around lunchtime today. I was going to go back and look to see when he was in office what committees he was on, because I feel like that may give us some indication, but you never know.
I'm doing a checking in on Ballotpedia here and seeing exactly what was his. Yeah, so he was in Senate, District 41, 2004 to 2016. Committee assignments. He was chair of Approps, Education, Energy, Finance, Rules. Education, Energy, Finance, Rules, Approps. I was wondering if there might be. I was wondering about labor. If he might be running for a labor commissioner. That would be
Or
something. That would be
corporation commissioner.
corporation commissioner would be possible. Man, that's a sweet gig, right? Corporation commissioner. I should do that. I should run for corporation commissioner. That's a solid gig.
Who's up this year? Dana Murphy got elected in 2018, and then who's Bob? Who's the other one that was elected last year? Bob Anthony, wasn't that last year?
I believe so.
Hasn't Bob Anthony been a corporation commissioner since like 1982?
For a long time.
At least, yeah. It's been a long time. Well, Bailey, you also mentioned State Senator Nathan Dom is running for U.S. Senate. He announced, so his announcement brings the total number of candidates to 3 that we knew of. We've got, and this is running for U.S. Senate against Senator James Lankford. So you've got Lankford as the incumbent. You've got Jackson Laymeyer as a challenger from the far right,
who's been in some big trouble with his reporting as of late.
Oh, like his finances and donations?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's broken some campaign finance laws, it seems.
Whoopsie daisy. Listeners, if you ever decide to run for office, you should be sure you get yourself a good compliance person to handle all of that, because it's a sticky wicket, and that's one you don't want to get messed up with.
Absolutely.
And then you guys, well, first let's talk about Dom before we discuss the 4th candidate that I just learned, I guess, just a minute ago, that someone else has entered the race. But Nathan Dom, of course, also, I think one of, if not the most conservative members of the state Senate right now. There's the response from Laymeyer's camp was that Dom's presence in the race was like orchestrated by the political elite to divide the conservative vote in the primary, basically to minimize Laymeyer's chances, and to ensure that Lankford would make it through the primary.
I'm not even sure about that narrative, because Nathan Dom is not the type of elected leader that flows with he's very good at like riding the waves, and he's okay with being controversial, right? So I don't think he has the relationships with the elites, quote unquote,
Right.
to be able to follow through with some type of methodical plan. I think this is because he has run for other positions before. I believe he tried to run for Congress
Yeah.
at one point.
Yeah.
And so this is just Nathan Dom wants to do this and wants to continue elevating his voice and trying to pursue these different positions of influence. I don't think there's some type of internal strategy to keep Lankford. No, this is Nathan Dom wants to try to pursue that seat and thinks he has an opportunity.
Well, so Dom terms out not next year, but because he just got reelected. So he terms out in 2024, I think. So he can run for U.S. Senate this time with no consequence, right? He doesn't lose his state house seat if he loses the Senate race. So why not run, right? Like it gives you a chance to raise some money, money that I believe under the new state laws can be transferred to other candidates or to a nonprofit. And so it gives him a chance to raise some money from his donors on what would otherwise be not an election year for himself, right? So like there's potentially like a strategy just from a fundraising perspective here, and so we'll we'll see what that looks like.
But I do think and agree that it does create a faction among the far right conservatives and the pro Trump conservatives who will have their votes split between Jackson and Nathan.
Right.
So,
Well, and it's interesting because I think Dom has way more name recognition than Jackson Laymeyer, and it kind of takes a bit of the wind out of the sails for Laymeyer because if they're going to they're going to horse that's known to be successful and not this upstart new guy who's already breaking campaign finance laws, right?
I mean, he said in the press that he has the record.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I don't think the Lankford campaign or any other like elite group has anything to do with this. I think this is Nathan Dom being Nathan Dom. He's running for Congress at least twice. Could get out of the primary. I mean, he's gonna want to do something when he can't work as a senator anymore, which will be the case within in 2024. So he's got to try and set himself up to do something, whether that's work for, or maybe he wants to be the next state party chair after Bennett with the bad hair. Maybe he wants to try and work for some national Republican organization that will hire people who say crazy shit. I don't know. Like I don't know what he wants to do, but I think you're right, Billy. This is Dom being Dom, trying to, bolster his name recognition, trying to make sure that he's in the press. He always wants to have his name in the press for something, fundraise, that's, and I think you're right. I think it'll divide that section of the primary electorate. I mean, do we think that this poses any real, like, do we think that Lawmeyer posed any real threat to Lankford without this? I don't. So I don't think there's any reason to think that this materially changes what the outcome of that election is going to be.
Well, and the race that I think will be actually interesting is Abby Broyles announcing that she's going to run in CD5.
That's interesting for a couple of reasons. Can we come right back to that though? Because
Yeah.
there's a fourth candidate in the U.S. Senate race that I guess announced yesterday on the 30th. I just saw the news story today. It's a Democrat. Is the first Democrat to enter the race. Young guy, Jason Bollinger. He's a Democrat from Oklahoma City, I think now. I'm looking at the Oklahoman story here, and it says he received an accounting and law degree from OU. He worked for the U.S. State Department in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years before coming back to OKC and starting a law practice. He's originally from Carter, which in Beckham County, and graduated from high school in Elk City. So everyone who announces now is announcing so they can campaign for it, but official filing isn't until April, and sometimes we get a sneaky late entry right into some of these races. Folks that tends to be folks who have a statewide profile already, right? Who could maybe they are in another statewide office or they've got a position where they can be in the news and keep their name recognition up, but there's not necessarily a political advantage to filing. This guy, though, Bollinger, is he's only 29, so young guy, political newcomer, aiming high. I don't know him. You guys don't know him either, right?
No, and I think that's the challenge. And for someone, I think this reeks of novice in the political space because of the things that you mentioned, Andy. Most people who run for a statewide seat as powerful as U.S. Senate have built a name recognition, not only within their communities, but across the state, or have the resourcing and backing to be able to quickly fundraise millions of dollars to then build that name recognition within a short period of time to try to conjure those votes. And so between the political dynamics of Oklahoma, with it being a strong conservative state, on top of this candidate not having that name recognition and likely not the funding to be able to develop that, this may be just someone putting his name in the hat to maybe have political aspirations in other areas in the future, but it's a slim to none chance that he has an opportunity to beat whoever wins in the Republican primary, right?
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think things are a little bit different now in that I think that this actually may be a way, depending, let me preface this. I think you still have to raise money. You still have to run a good campaign. You still have to be a good candidate. You still have to not trip over yourself in any kind of debates or TV interviews or whatever, which, I mean, who knows, there'll even be a debate. You'd have to get Lankford or whoever comes on the primary to agree to a debate, which they may not even do. But because we are so polarized, right, there's not a lot of crossover, right? So it might be that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, a young 29-year-old lawyer from Elk City would challenge the sitting senator and lose 85-15 because the sitting senator is going to win all of their voters and half the other party's voters too, right? But that's not the case anymore, right? You can go to this guy. I mean, theoretically, he could raise no money, never do a campaign event, do nothing but get his name on the ballot and get 40% of the vote, right? And so
I don't know about that, Scott, because when Drew Edmondson, who has the fundraising ability, who has the name recognition, who has served in statewide office in the past, ran for governor, right? He barely got 40% of the vote, right? So I don't think this was the case to where somebody as fresh as him could even get that much. He may be lucky to get 20% of the vote. And that's if he's able to even break $1 million in fundraising to be able to have his name out there, especially if the incumbent maintains his seat in the primary election. So now if Jackson or Nathan were to somehow magically take out Senator Lankford, then maybe there's possibility that he could get more of the votes. But when we're talking statewide, it's going to be very tough for someone who has no name recognition, who's running as a Democrat for a statewide office in Oklahoma, to probably even break 25% of the vote.
Let me alter what I said. I think I should have put a percentage on it. I would say I think we're so polarized now that there's very little crossover. I think Drew is actually a kind of a special case because Drew did have all those resources that you mentioned. Drew also had some serious baggage in rural counties that I think hurt him with some folks that might have been more inclined to vote for a Democrat in another Democratic candidate. I guess I just think there's so little crossover. I think that most Democrats who show up and vote in this election are going to show up and they're going to vote for whoever is running against James Lankford, right? Like, I don't know. I can't. And so maybe
But does that break 40%? I don't think that does in the state. So Because even with, like, for example, when Abby Broyles ran for statewide office, she didn't break
Yeah.
40, right?
Yeah. Where did she end up? Where did she end up at?
It was something in the 30s.
Yeah. So I guess I shouldn't have said 40%. I pulled that number out of my ass. But like, I guess what I'm saying is like, I I think that Mr. Bollinger, assuming that he, does everything else at kind of the level you would expect a first time candidate to do it, I don't know that his numbers will be that far off of any other candidate that would run for Senate against Langford, because we're just that polarized, and that's the way the electorate looks right now. So it may not be 60-40, it may be 65-35 or 70-30 or whatever it is. But I think Democrats that show up and vote in the U.S. Senate race next year, by and large, they're going to vote for the Democratic candidate, whoever that is. And I think Republicans that show up and vote in the Senate race next year are going to vote for the Republican candidate. And so I don't know that there's a whole lot that Mr. Bollinger can do, seasoned politician or not, that's going to change that dynamic. That's the point that I would try to make.
So I will add to this by saying, like, my brain starts at what's the baseline for straight party voting, straight ticket voting on the ballots, right? So last year in 2020, um, let me see here, almost half of all voters, so 45.5% of all voters used straight party voting during the general election in November. So that it was higher among Republicans. 71% of straight party voters were Republican, 28% were Democrats. So for Democrats, that comes out to just under 200,000 votes. Now, obviously, turnout was record high last year, but going back to 2016 and 2012, the three last general elections, presidential general elections, the Democrats have had, I mean, right close to 200,000 votes. It was like 218,000, 200 or 187,000, 198,000. So right around the same limit. Republicans, however, had way more, just more votes. So if it's in a gubernatorial election year, a mid cycle year, midterm elections, it turnout's a lot lower, right? Like I think 15-20% lower than it would be in a general. And so you're going to have a lower number of votes, but proportionally, I would assume it's going to be about the same, right? So somewhere around 30% of Democrats are going to vote straight ticket, but that is not a majority of voters. And so that is, I think he's going to pick up all the straight party voters, presumably, and he would pick up presumably a few others that might just not like whoever the Republican nominee is. If it's Lankford, if it's Dom, you can, it's that. But I don't, mathematically, I see it's a very difficult path. However, I will say, as we often say at Let's Fix This, good for him for trying, right? It takes
Yeah,
a
that
shit
was
ton of,
definitely the point I was going to raise. I
yeah,
mean, anytime you're trying to run for office, that's a great thing to put your name in the hat, to um, always challenge offices, to not leave anything going unchallenged, because that will then energize voters to have a reason to participate. Because otherwise, there won't be a U.S. Senate general election. There would just be an election for Republicans to pick a candidate if a Democratic candidate didn't run for that race. And so it's always good and healthy for our democracy for people to not leave seats unchallenged.
right. That's exactly right. And I was going to say that's the risk is that if he doesn't run and nobody else runs, then yeah, whoever wins the Republican primary gets elected, and a third or a little more than a third of Oklahoma voters don't even get a chance to vote at all. And that is a real tragedy of democracy. So, yeah, and it takes a ton of courage. Why not? If he's interested in getting into politics, might as well jump in at the top, right? There's no harm in that. As long as Scott said you don't, royally mess up along the way, like mess up on your disclosure filings with the ethics commission or campaign finance reports, those kinds of things.
Because sometimes people run to either spur turnout to help get more people participating, or they run to help build name recognition, right? And so I think as long as he understands the realities and the challenges that he faces in this election cycle, and he's using it as opportunity to continue building and growing and getting to know the people of Oklahoma, then it could be a good opportunity for him.
Can I give just one free piece of advice for him? This is just I'm not a professional consultant, so we'll do this. This will be free of charge. Don't have an affair with a staffer. Don't do that. There's a lot of first time candidates seem like they fall into that trap. Declare for office, prepare to have their entire life scrutinized, and then 3 months later they're having an affair with their staffer, or someone else. So don't do that.
Yeah, that's always good advice. While we're talking about candidates too, because I'm like going through all of the news stories from the past couple of weeks, another one that I missed is that Mike Mazzei has dropped out of the state treasurer race. This was earlier this week, I guess last weekend. Um, he said that Raymond James Financial, with whom he's been long associated, did not want him involved in the race. And so he dropped out.
That's interesting.
I was like, whoa, okay. Um, I wonder if it was one of those deals where it's like, listen, you can either run for office or you can work here, but you can't do both, which is
There are a lot of corporations that I've learned
Mhm.
that will tell people you are not allowed to run for office, even if it is a nonpartisan
Yeah.
position. So
Yeah, I think like when I was at the university, and this may have changed, but you could run for city council, I think, but nothing higher. City council and school board, but not anything that was partisan. Although I
yeah,
feel like they may have changed that because I'm not entirely sure. So I used to be on a homeowners association. That was the highest office I've held, and a scooter club. That was fun too.
well, and I believe that may be the case because Bria Clark works for the University of Oklahoma, but she serves as mayor. And so, but that's a nonpartisan race. So that makes sense.
Speaking of city municipal elections, Oklahoma City City Council this week voted on their redistricting criteria. And listeners, if you tuned in for my solo episode last week, you heard me rant about that for a few minutes. The issue, not about the city. Um, I I have mixed feelings about Oklahoma City. I'll chime in on this. They Councilman Stone Cipher had a resolution that basically said city council is going to do it themselves. They're not going to use a commission. Um, People, not politicians, and some other groups, League of Women Voters, and some other folks had uh, encouraged the city council to consider using some sort of commission, either in an advisory role or a citizen-led commission to do their drawing themselves. City council, as Bailey just said, is nonpartisan. I don't think anyone's really worried about partisan gerrymandering in a nonpartisan race. But we are worried about politicians drawing their own districts, right? They may know which uh, they certainly know which neighborhoods are favorable to them, and as I have long argued, there's no reason in my mind that politicians should get to pick their own voters. Maps should be drawn to reflect the community or the state or whatever, and so it's still ongoing. The door leaves the door is open still for them to use a commission. I think some council members are interested in that. They did say, Council Member Stone Cipher said that the plan is to basically have the staff draw the maps, release it to the public, have some public meetings, get some feedback, and then tweak the maps as necessary, which is a tremendous step. That's actually really good. I wish the legislature would release their maps so we could do that there. Anyway, so I just want to have a quick note. I know Stone Cipher's worried about what's happening in Norman because they have a commission and it's become polarized down there. And like Norman's a different deal, right? College towns, it's always a different deal in college towns like that. Oklahoma City as a very large city, it's just a little bit different. All right, Bailey, I cut you off earlier about the race for the 5th district between Abby Broyles and Stephanie Bice. Let's go back to that.
Yeah. So right after Abby ran against Jim Inhofe, she started a nonprofit called Grit, focused on um, voter engagement, especially among young people. And so people knew that, she was eventually going to run for something else. Like that wasn't going to be her only run for office. And so she's made the decision and announced that she's going to run against Stephanie Bice for Congressional District 5. What makes that interesting is the dynamics of Oklahoma City, particularly Oklahoma County, right? You have this area is more progressive than other parts of Oklahoma. And so, with her ability to fundraise and her name recognition, um, it could be potentially be a close race, right? So, we'll have to see how it goes.
Well, I think the other thing that makes this interesting is, to circle back to what Andy was just saying, we don't know what the maps look like, right? And we're not going to know what the maps look like until November 15th, right? And so, you know, there's a couple scenarios. There's a scenario in which CD5 actually doesn't look that much different than it did in 2018 or in 2020. There's a scenario in which the district remains very purple. It remains maybe an R+2 district, and in a year where Dems do well nationally and Republicans are not very enthusiastic and there's high Dem turnout, all those sorts of things, it's a seat that can absolutely swing. There's another scenario where you carve up the district in particular ways to take it from an R+3 district to an R+15 district. Like that's absolutely possible. In which case it would become, I mean, nothing is impossible, but it would become a very, very challenging seat to win, depending on what the map looks like. And that's going to come down to one, how important is it? How important is it that to Republicans in the state and Republicans nationally, how important do they feel it is to protect this seat, right? Do they feel that Bice is vulnerable and that she needs to be shored up in the district? That's one component, right? And that's something that the state party will look at, as well as the Republican National Committee and the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee, I'm sure, will have input into that as well. Another thing is caucus dynamics, right? Or I shouldn't say caucus, politics within the delegation, right? So you have we have some very senior representatives like Tom Cole, and then we have the most junior member of the delegation is Representative Bice. Some of the senior members may or may not like you messing with their districts too much, and if you're going to start taking, if you're going to start messing with CD5 by necessity, that means that you have to mess with the other districts as well, which could mean there's changes to like Frank Lucas's district or Tom Cole's district that for various reasons they may or may not want, right? So those dynamics play. So those are a couple other reasons why this is an interesting race. But the third thing is, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's I mean, we know that the race is going to be Bice v. Broyles, right? I don't think we necessarily know that either. Representative Bice could face a primary opponent. Abby Broyles could face a primary opponent. I assume Tom Guild is going to run. I don't think I don't think he'll win. But it wasn't that long ago that there was wasn't that long ago that there was a Democratic congresswoman who represented CD5. I have no idea what her plans are or are not, but there's always that possibility as well. So I agree with you, Bailey, that Abby could be a formidable candidate in Oklahoma City, but I think that depends on A, what the district looks like, and B, what happens in the race in terms of a primary between now and then.
That you brought up some really interesting points, especially because for Republicans, it's only to their advantage to make those changes, right? I don't foresee Congressman Cole or Congressman Lucas having any fuss about changes in their district because those areas are already conservative, right? It doesn't matter if you bring in sprinkles of progressive neighborhoods into their district. It's not going to change the overall composition of the percentage of how folks vote in their districts. And so that will be the key to whether the stronghold will remain to where all 5 congressional districts will remain to Republicans, or if there'll be a shot for Democrats to hold CD5 again. Will be how those lines are drawn. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if parts of Oklahoma City or certain parts of Oklahoma County aren't in CD5. Like that would be very, very strange, but also the public will know why.
I
It'll
don't
be very overt.
I don't like you guys tempting the thing from on high, right? Like this is
You're tempting the thing from high atop the thing.
yeah, that's exactly right. That's a good West Wing reference. As someone who has spent an inordinate amount of time drawing maps of our congressional districts and looking at all of the precincts and all the ways to draw the maps, the only reason that they would divide Oklahoma County in such a way is for like 100% purely partisan reasons, right? Like now the caveat of like keeping Tinker in the 4th district, fine. That's been that way for a long time. Everybody wants it. That's fine. But otherwise, as listeners may remember from last week, if you look at the map that People Not Politicians has submitted, and several others, Dan Williams and some other folks, there's the right number of people in Oklahoma County. It's in the county limits. Like there's no reason to make it a funny looking shape. Just keep it its happy little rectangle and let's move on down the road. And I don't really know. I assume nationally the Republicans want every single seat. They're not just going to give up on one and think, well, it's not a big deal. But who knows?
I mean, I wouldn't say that they wouldn't think it's a big deal. I think that they would. I think the issue is not that they don't want to keep every single seat. I think the issue is, do they think that do they need to shore up this district, number one, and number two, does shoring it up cost them anything? Right. I don't. I agree. I don't particularly think that it does. But I'm also, they haven't asked me to come into the room and talk to them when they're when they're deciding how to draw the map. So, I personally, I think both scenarios are equally plausible. I think we could end up with a map that looks pretty similar to the one we have. I think we could end up with a map where CD5 in particular looks wildly different, and I don't really know. I think there's good reasons that you could expect either one of those things.
Well, and less than thinking about the Republican Democratic divide, they really should be thinking about the ideological divides, right? Ensuring that the makeup of districts have equitable representation of moderates, right? Because the far right conservatives, and maybe they're just loud. I don't know. But it seems like there's a growing faction of the Republican Party post the loss of Donald Trump in his election, right? And so, I mean, we're seeing glimpses of that in the struggles within the state party and those challenges. And so, trying to divide things up to keep one congressional district that could potentially be purple could then lead to people of certain factions being more likely to win seats, right? So, I mean, I think the mask debates and the vaccine debates and the schools, whether to be in person or not, are just the tip of the iceberg on the philosophical discussions that are happening among conservatives in this time. And so I think even that's a piece they need to be thinking about when districts and lines are being drawn.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, as we near the end of the episode, I wanted to touch on the update this week regarding the case of Julius Jones. So, in case you missed it, a couple of weeks ago, I guess the Pardon and Parole Board met and voted to recommend not clemency. That's the new one, but
To
commutation.
commute, yeah, to
Yes.
commute a
So
sentence.
they recommended to commute a sentence. And so went to the governor, and the governor took no action. And then this week said that he is going to wait for the clemency hearing, which is coming up. And
It
from what I
happens 21 days before a scheduled execution.
And his execution is scheduled, I think, the same week as special session. I think it's like
it's
like November 18th or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so that's during special session, which is
I think that the commutation or the clemency hearing is, I think, October 21st.
Okay, well that math checks out. And so from what I understand from talking to people like Ryan Kiesel, I think that this move makes sense. It's somewhat like with given the responsibilities of the board and what information can be presented at this meeting. So the clemency hearing provides for testimony from more people, including Mr. Jones himself, right? Which I would argue is very important. And so the governor said he's going to withhold making a decision until he has that opportunity, which I think I know a lot of folks, if I was him, right, every day that goes by that I'm still in prison or still on death row is not a good day. But I think given the context, this move makes sense. Do you guys have any other, am I wrong on that?
I just hope that the governor isn't using it as an excuse to, kick the can down the road. Because either way, this case has received national attention, right? And the governor has positioned himself to be a criminal justice reform governor, right? So in his mind, he may be stuck between, do I really believe in the things that I've been pushing for in criminal justice versus the other side of his party, who's quote unquote tough on crime, right? Would it make him look weak on crime to commute this sentence, right? And so I hope that the governor is truly using this as an opportunity to weigh out the facts because somebody's life is in jeopardy, right? This country and this state has had a history of killing folks who were innocent, right? And this is a huge decision that we can't go back and say, whoops, my bad. We realize that you're innocent. Let's bring you back to life. Once you execute someone, that's it. And we have had a history of that in this country, especially of Black men. And so the governor really has to take his obligation seriously and do the right thing, right? Weigh out the facts and do the right thing.
Well, and on related note, there's that report that came out this week from the Washington Post. Who was that about police shootings, right? And Oklahoma is the worst, right? Oklahoma City, I think, was the worst. In the whole country. Yeah, did you see that?
No, I'm shocked.
Oh, there's that sarcasm, listeners.
What? No way that's true. I can't. You're telling me there's gambling going on in here? No.
But also, Oklahoma County, I'm trying to think of which levels of law enforcement, but they just announced on the news, and this was like maybe a day or two that I heard of their uptick in body cams. So coincidentally, with that announcement of how terrible we are in use of force, they're also announcing that they are scaling up different law enforcement professionals' use of body cams and how they're supposed to keep those on. And so I just thought that timing was Interesting.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Oklahoma County just announced that all their deputies are going to have body cams. Yeah. So either, and I don't know if most of the, I don't think most of the shootings are by Oklahoma County sheriff's deputies. I think the data was by municipal, yeah, city police. But, um, more cameras means either we'll have less shootings or we'll see more murders. That's and to your point, right? Like, uh, when a police officer shoots and kills somebody, that person did not have the opportunity to stand trial. We essentially allowed that officer to be.
Judge, jury, and executioner.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. That's exactly right. And that is not how it's supposed to be, right?
And
There's
while the culture's changing, we still have people who have this defensiveness for our law enforcement, right or wrong, right? And so it's crucial that we are providing those mechanisms, especially if we're going to allow law enforcement to continue having the power that they have,
Mhm.
to always be monitored, right? To always have those recordings. Because I'm still floored at the guy who was in that truck
Mm,
and someone who captured the footage of
mhm.
the road rage incident, to where the guy in the truck literally came over and pushed the other vehicle
Yeah,
into the median and could have killed the
yeah,
people in that car and could have killed that 4-year-old he had in the back seat.
yeah,
And the deputy said, you did a stupid thing and this is borderline this or this, but I'm going to let you go and just give you a ticket. Like, that's insane, but footage keeps people accountable, and public opinion and the advocacy and awareness that people have today will also keep folks accountable, to where you kill somebody, um you have to there all eyes are on the system at this
Yeah.
point. That's what I'm trying to
You
say.
know, coming back to the Julius Jones case, in terms of I agree with you, Bailey. I hope the governor isn't just using this as a way to delay a decision. As a way to delay his decision, especially if it's a decision he's already made that he knows is going to be unpopular. So that's the first thing. I also, though, I think agree. I don't know enough about the like legal nuance here. And if you've talked to Ryan and he said that like it makes sense in terms of the kinds of hearing and the kinds of facts and other pieces of evidence that can be heard, that it makes sense to wait until after the clemency hearing, then I can give the governor the benefit of the doubt there. I don't know, maybe I'm a cynic. I am a cynic. I don't I think we're at the point now where Governor Stitt doesn't make any decision or public statement without weighing how he thinks it's going to affect his presidential run. So um I think I hope that he carefully considers all of the evidence and makes what he feels is truly the right decision based on all the available evidence and data. I think we're kidding ourselves if we don't think politics has played into this. I think politics, for better or worse, is absolutely part of this.
I
And
wouldn't even say politics. I would say advocacy, because the grassroots movement of people lifting this case has made the difference, right? The education that's happened, and then even the documentary, that the Last Defense documentary, for instance, then spurred. And so I think the growing conversation and even national attention um, is leading to where we are today. Because if that didn't happen, he would have just been executed without any type of scrutiny.
I agree. I guess what I'm saying is, when I say politics, I think we're kidding ourselves if we think that the governor is going to make this decision in a vacuum without considering what the implications are for his political future, whatever he wants that to be.
Gotcha.
That's
Yeah. Yeah. Gotcha.
that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't, I make jokes all the time about Stitt running for president because I think that's what he wants to do. Like, I think that's his end game. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. I don't know, but um, you know, I think that this is a decision that should be made without considering how it will or won't impact your political fortunes. Um, I think that most politicians of both parties absolutely think about that when they make those decisions, which is unfortunate when you're, and it's more than unfortunate. It's terrible when you're talking about decisions that affect the taking of a life, innocent or not, quite frankly. Um, um, so that's what I guess what I mean when I say that no matter what the situation is, I think politics will be a part of it, which is not great.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, I told you. The first thing I said in this episode, things are grim.
Yeah. I would just leave it with you to bring us on. We got happy for a moment somewhere in that episode.
Hey, you know what? We actually we can leave on a couple positive notes. So Oklahoma City, at least, COVID cases are down 50% in the last 4 weeks.
Woo!
From the last week of August, we've seen a drop of about 50%, which is fantastic. We've seen a significant uptick in vaccinations. Great job, everybody! Keep getting them shots. If you haven't gotten your shot, get it. If you know people that haven't gotten their shot, please tell them to get it.
And Scott, people can now get their booster if they need
Yeah,
to.
so if you got Pfizer, if you got the Pfizer vaccine and you're 6 months past your second shot and you're over the age of 65, or you're 19 to 64 and you have a comorbid condition or are in a high exposure occupation, which includes frontline health workers, teachers, those are like the big two, then you're eligible for a booster. You don't have to get one. Most of the places that are requiring vaccinations, at least so far as I've seen, they're not requiring boosters. Whether to get boosted is kind of up to you. And it's a decision you should make in consultation with your doctor based on your risk factors and health history and all those sorts of things. But if you haven't gotten your shot, you should get it. If you know people that haven't gotten it, encourage them to get it. Other big news in the COVID front today. So Merck, which does not have a COVID vaccine, they have actually been in trial, conducting a trial for a drug. This is an antiviral drug that's called molnupiravir. Molnupiravir.
Watch your mouth.
Yeah, there you go. So this is an antiviral drug that's been in a clinical trial for treatment of acute COVID-19 disease. Big deal. They actually stopped the trial early because the results are so promising. Two things can stop a clinical trial early. One, if it looks like, oh, this is hurting people, they will stop the trial early. If it looks like the drug is harmful or the intervention is harmful, they'll stop the trial and say we shouldn't be this. It's no longer ethical to conduct this experiment because it looks like not only does this not work, but it might be harmful. But the other reason you can stop the trial early is if it looks like the results are so good, it is unethical to continue the trial because to continue the trial is depriving other people that might benefit from this treatment or intervention. And that looks like the case with this. So they stopped the trial early. It looks like for prevention of hospitalization in acute COVID-19 disease, decreases hospitalization by 50% in the treatment group compared to the placebo group. 8 deaths in the control group, none in the placebo group. So significant impact on hospitalization and mortality, which is really the ball game. Right. I mean, that would be huge. It's a medicine that's taken twice daily for 5 days. I have not seen any data on side effects. I don't know if they'd be similar to the other antivirals or not. But this is big news. Merck has said that they're going to put their data together and apply for emergency use authorization from the FDA and other worldwide regulatory bodies. This would be a game changer, not just in the United States, but also in places around the world that don't yet have access to vaccines or for which vaccination is going to be particularly challenging given the lack of health infrastructure. To have a therapy that is well tolerated, easily administered, and ideally inexpensive would absolutely be a game changer. So this is really, really huge news. Another piece of data that I'll be looking for that obviously we don't have yet is whether or not this is a medicine that will have an impact on development of long COVID symptoms. I think what we're going to see in the future, in coming months and years, is a real strain on our healthcare system because of the number of patients who had COVID and then have had persistent symptoms of varying degrees of severity. So, if this drug impacts the development of long COVID by reducing the risk there, which we don't know yet, that would also be tremendous. So we can end on a happy note because we have two positive pieces of COVID news. So not everything is grim, just Senate races and death penalty cases.
Listeners, that is huge because in the almost 2 years that I've been on the pod and the almost year and a half that we've been in the pandemic, this is one of the first times where I've heard Scott genuinely talk about something positive in the direction that the pandemic is going. So I feel good, and this is huge.
That's exactly right.
Good COVID news today.
That's a good place to end. We'll do that. Scott, thanks for being here. Thanks for the good news.
Yeah, man. Glad to be here.
Bailey, thanks for being here. Good to see you.
Thank you, Andy.
Listeners, thank you for being here as well. Of course, you're why we're here. Please go ask your neighbors. It's nice weather. Go outside. Ask your neighbors if they're registered to vote, and encourage them to do so if they haven't already. We have many elections coming up, including some important ones next year, starting, I think, in February with the Oklahoma City mayoral election. Tulsa, I think, has a mayoral election next year. Not to mention all of the state legislature, state house, half the Senate and Congress, all these things, governor, statewide electeds. It's time to start thinking about that. We are a year and a month away from Election Day. So we got to start now, folks. All right. On that note, remember, decisions are made by those who show up. Have a good week.